She married a monster to save her family. But the real horror? She might be falling for him. In a city where debts are paid in blood and daughters, Alara Whitcomb walks toward her wedding like a lamb to slaughter. Her groom? Darian Blackthorne. The duke they whisper about in locked rooms. The man whose last fiancée vanished, whose touch, they say, leaves ruin. But what if the rumors are wrong? What if the beast hiding in plain sight isn't the one she married? Stay with me until the end, like this video, and comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain came down like judgment. Alara stood at her bedroom window, watching it batter the cobblestones 3 stories below. The city looked different in weather like this, meaner, sharper at the edges. The gaslights along Harrow Street flickered and hissed, their halos of light barely making a dent in the darkness pressing against the glass. Behind her, the door creaked open. Alara, her mother's voice, thin, worn down to nothing. You need to get dressed. Alara didn't turn around. She kept her eyes on the street, watching a carriage roll past, its wheels cutting through puddles deep enough to drown in. I'm not going. A pause, then footsteps, careful and slow. Her mother's hand landed on her shoulder, light, like she was afraid Alara might shatter. Sweetheart, we've talked about this. No. Alara's jaw tightened. You talked. Father talked. I just sat there. Because there's nothing left to say. Her mother's fingers curled, gripping harder now, desperate. The creditors came again yesterday. They took the silver, the paintings. They're taking everything, Alara. If you don't do this, if you don't marry him, we lose the house. Your father loses his business. Your sisters. Don't. Alara spun around, pulling free. Don't put this on them. Her mother flinched, but she didn't back down. She looked older than she had a month ago. Gray streaked through her dark hair like cracks in porcelain, and the lines around her mouth had deepened into something permanent. I'm not putting it on anyone. I'm telling you the truth. We're drowning, and he's the only lifeline we have. He's a monster. He's a duke. He's both. Her mother closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were wet. Maybe, but he's also the only man willing to pay off your father's debts in exchange for a wife. And if you walk away from this, we don't get a second chance. Alara's chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped iron bands around her ribs and was slowly twisting them shut. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But where? With what money? And what would happen to her mother, her father, her 2 younger sisters when the creditors came back and found nothing left to take but flesh? What's he like? She asked quietly. Her mother hesitated. I've never met him. But you've heard things. Another pause, longer this time. Yes. Tell me. Alara, tell me. Her mother looked away, toward the window, toward the rain still hammering down like it had a personal grudge against the world. They say he's cold, controlled, that he doesn't smile, doesn't laugh, that he runs his estate like a military camp. Everything precise, everything in its place. And the rest? Her mother swallowed hard. There was a woman, years ago. She loved him. He didn't return it. She threw herself into the river. Alara felt her stomach twist. And before that, her mother continued, voice barely above a whisper, he was engaged. The girl's name was Catherine. 2 weeks before the wedding, she disappeared. No one ever found her. They think he killed her. They think he did something. The silence that followed was suffocating. Alara turned back to the window. Down below, another carriage had stopped. This one was black as a hearse, pulled by 4 horses whose coats gleamed even in the rain. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a long coat that made him look like he'd walked straight out of a nightmare. He looked up. And even from 3 stories away, even through the rain and the darkness, Alara felt his gaze lock onto hers like a trap snapping shut. He's here, her mother breathed. Alara didn't move, couldn't. The man below didn't move either. He just stood there, staring up at her, water streaming down his face, and she had the strangest, most unnerving thought. He looks like he's been waiting for me his whole life. Then he turned and walked toward the front door, and the spell broke. Get dressed, her mother said again. Please. This time, Alara didn't argue. The dress had arrived 2 days ago. It came in a black lacquered box carried by two servants who wouldn't meet her eyes. Inside, wrapped in layers of silk the color of old bone, was a gown unlike anything Alara had ever seen. The fabric was heavy, almost liquid, and when she lifted it to the light, it shimmered like oil on water, dark greens and deep purples bleeding into black. There was no note, no explanation, just the dress, and beneath it, a second, smaller box. Alara had opened it alone. Inside was a necklace, a single black stone set in silver, hanging from a delicate chain. The stone was smooth, polished to a mirror shine, and when she held it up, she could see her own reflection staring back at her, distorted, warped, like she was looking at herself through dark water. She'd put it back in the box and shoved it under her bed. Now, standing in front of her mirror, wearing the dress he'd sent, she wished she'd burned it instead. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. The bodice hugged her ribs, the sleeves fell just past her wrists, and the skirt pooled around her feet like spilled ink. She looked different, older, harder, like someone who could survive what was coming, but she didn't feel like that person. She felt like a girl playing dress-up in a dead woman's clothes. A knock at the door. Her sister's voice. "Alara? They're ready." Alara closed her eyes, took a breath that didn't quite reach her lungs, and opened them again. "Coming." The drawing room was too quiet. Her father stood by the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back, staring into the flames like they held answers he'd been searching for his entire life. He didn't look at her when she entered, didn't acknowledge her at all. Her mother sat on the edge of the settee, back straight, hands folded in her lap. She looked like she was waiting for someone to pronounce a death sentence. And in the center of the room, standing perfectly still, was him, Darian Blackthorne. He was taller than she'd expected, broader. He wore a dark suit that fit him like armor, and his hair, black as coal, cut short and severe, framed a face that could have been carved from stone. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile, and eyes. His eyes were the worst part. They were pale. Not blue, not gray, but something in between, like ice over deep water. And when they fixed on her, she felt the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. "Miss Whitcomb." His voice was low, controlled, every syllable measured and deliberate. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Agreeing, like she'd had a choice. Alara lifted her chin. "Your Grace." He inclined his head, a slight, precise movement. "I trust the gown was satisfactory. It fits." "Good." He paused, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "I apologize for the short notice. I know this arrangement has been sudden." "Sudden," she repeated. "That's one word for it." Her father made a small, choked sound. Her mother shot her a warning look, but Darian's expression didn't change. If anything, something flickered in those pale eyes. Amusement, maybe, or interest. It was gone before she could be sure. "You're direct," he said. "I appreciate that." "I'm honest. Whether you appreciate it or not is your problem." This time, her father actually turned around. "Alara, it's fine." Darian's voice cut through the room like a blade. "She has every right to speak her mind." He looked at Alara again. "In fact, I prefer it. I have no use for a wife who can't think for herself." "And what use do you have for a wife?" Alara asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Darian tilted his head slightly, considering her. "You want the truth?" "I want to know what I'm walking into." "Fair enough." He took a step closer, not threatening, but deliberate, closing the distance. "I need a wife because society expects it. Because running an estate of this size without one raises questions I don't have the patience to answer. And because your father owes debts he can't repay, and I'm in a position to clear them in exchange for something he values less than his reputation." Alara's breath caught. The bluntness of it, the cold, clinical dissection of their entire situation hit her harder than any insult could have. "You're not going to lie to me," she said quietly. "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't like games." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "You're intelligent enough to know what this is. A transaction. An arrangement. If I pretend otherwise, you'll spend the rest of your life waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'd rather we both know where we stand." Alara stared at him, at this man who'd bought her like livestock and was now standing in her family's drawing room telling her exactly how little this meant to him. And the worst part? She almost respected him for it. "What happens if I say no?" she asked. Her father made another strangled noise. Her mother looked like she might faint, but Darian just watched her, unblinking. "Then I leave. Your father's creditors arrive tomorrow morning. By tomorrow night, you'll have nothing. And in a month, maybe 2, you'll be married to whoever will take you. Some merchant's son, perhaps, or a clerk looking to climb the social ladder. Someone who'll smile and lie and tell you he loves you while he spends your dowry on his mistress. And you're better than that?" "No." His mouth curved. Not quite a smile, something colder. "But at least I'm honest about what I am." Alara felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to run, to get as far away from this man as possible. But there was nowhere to run to. "When's the wedding?" she asked. 3 days. Her mother gasped. Her father's shoulders sagged in relief, and Darian just kept watching her with those ice water eyes, waiting. "Fine," Alara said. 3 days. He nodded once. "I'll send a carriage for you the morning of. Bring whatever you want. If there's anything you need, tell my steward and he'll arrange it." "That's it?" "That's it." He turned to leave. Made it halfway to the door before Alara spoke again. "Why me?" He stopped, didn't turn around. "Excuse me? You could have married anyone, someone from a better family. Someone who'd bring you connections, alliances. Why take on my father's debts? Why marry me?" For a long moment, he was silent. Then he looked back over his shoulder, and the expression on his face made something cold slither down her spine. "Because," he said quietly, "everyone else was afraid." And then he was gone. The next 2 days passed in a blur. Seamstresses arrived to adjust the dress. Alara stood on a platform in her bedroom while they pinned and tucked, their hands quick and efficient, their mouths shut tight. They wouldn't meet her eyes either. More boxes arrived from Blackthorn's estate. Shoes, gloves, a veil so delicate it looked like spun cobwebs. And more jewelry, all of it black or silver, all of it beautiful and cold and wrong. On the second night, Alara's youngest sister, Charlotte, slipped into her room after midnight. "Are you scared?" Charlotte whispered, curling up beside her on the bed. Alara wrapped an arm around her. "Yes. Is he really as bad as they say? I don't know. What if he hurts you?" Alara closed her eyes. "Then I'll hurt him back." Charlotte was quiet for a moment. Then, "I heard Father crying last night." Alara's chest tightened. "Charlie. He said he was sorry, that he never meant for this to happen." Charlotte's voice was so small. "Is it true? That we'd lose everything if you didn't marry him?" "Yes. I hate this. Me too." They lay there in the dark, listening to the rain that hadn't stopped since Blackthorn's first visit, and Alara tried not to think about what 3 days from now would bring. She failed. The morning of the wedding, the sky was the color of old bruises. The carriage Blackthorn sent was the same one from that first night, black, sleek, pulled by horses that looked like they'd been bred for war. The driver helped her inside without a word, and then they were moving, cutting through the empty streets like a knife through flesh. Alara pressed her hand against the window, watching her family's house shrink behind her. Her mother had cried. Her father had gripped her shoulders and told her she was saving them all, that he'd never forget it, that she was braver than he deserved. Charlotte had just held on and wouldn't let go until Alara promised to write, and now she was alone. The estate was an hour outside the city, hidden behind high walls and iron gates that looked like they were designed to keep people out. Or in. When the carriage rolled through them, Alara's first thought was, "This is a fortress." Her second thought was, "I'm never leaving." The house itself was massive, gray stone, sharp angles, windows like dead eyes staring out at nothing. It sat at the top of a hill, surrounded by gardens that had been manicured within an inch of their lives. Everything was precise, controlled, not a leaf out of place. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. The carriage stopped at the front steps. The driver opened the door, offered his hand. Alara took it, stepped down onto gravel that crunched under her shoes, and looked up. Darian was waiting. He stood at the top of the steps, dressed in black, his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't move as she approached, didn't speak, just watched her climb toward him, one step at a time, until she was close enough to see the tension in his jaw, the rigid set of his shoulders. "Welcome to Thornfield," he said. Alara looked past him, at the doors standing open like a mouth. "It's lovely." "You're lying. You're perceptive." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "The ceremony will be in the chapel. My steward will show you where to wait. And after?" "After," he said, "we have dinner, and then you'll have your own rooms. You won't be disturbed." Alara blinked. "My own rooms?" "Yes. We're not—" "No." His voice was flat, final. "Not unless you want to. This is a marriage of convenience, Miss Whitcomb. I have no interest in forcing you into anything you haven't agreed to." She stared at him. At this man who'd bought her, who stood there like a statue carved from ice, telling her he wasn't going to touch her. "Why?" she asked. "Because I'm many things, Hick," he said quietly, "but I'm not that." And before she could respond, he turned and walked into the house, leaving her standing there in the bruised morning light, wondering what kind of monster kept his promises. The chapel was small, intimate, too intimate. Alara stood at the altar, hands clasped in front of her, and tried not to look at the man beside her. The priest was old, his voice cracked and thin, and he rushed through the vows like he was afraid someone might burst through the doors and stop him. Maybe he was. Maybe he knew what everyone else seemed to know, that this marriage was wrong, that Darian Blackthorne wasn't someone you tied yourself to if you wanted to survive. But Alara spoke her vows anyway, and when Darian slipped the ring onto her finger, black stone set in silver, matching the necklace she still hadn't worn, his hands were steady. Hers were shaking. "You may kiss the bride." Darian looked at her, really looked, for the first time since she'd arrived. And then he leaned in, slow and deliberate, and pressed his mouth to hers. It was brief, controlled, over in seconds, but Alara felt it down to her bones. When he pulled back, his eyes were unreadable. "Mrs. Blackthorne," he said, and just like that, it was done. Dinner was silent. They sat at opposite ends of a table long enough to seat 20, eating food Alara couldn't taste. The dining room was all dark wood and dim lighting, portraits of dead blackthorns staring down at them from the walls. Alara counted 7 courses. 7. By the 5th, she couldn't take it anymore. "Does anyone else live here?" she asked. Darian looked up from his plate. "The staff." "No family?" "No." "Friends?" "No." "So it's just you?" "Yes." Alara set down her fork. "That must be lonely." "It's efficient. It's sad." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You don't know me well enough to make that judgment." "You're right. I don't know you at all." She leaned back in her chair. "But I'm going to be living here, sleeping under this roof, eating at this table. So maybe you could give me something, anything. Just talk to me." He was quiet for a long moment, then, "What do you want to know? Why did your last fiancé disappear?" The temperature in the room plummeted. Darian's jaw tightened. "That's what you want to start with? You said I could ask." "I said you could talk. I didn't say I'd answer." "Then this is going to be a very long marriage." He stared at her. And for the first time, Alara saw something other than control in his face, something raw and sharp and dangerous. "She left," he said finally. "Catherine, she left because she realized what I was." "And what are you?" "Exactly what they say I am." Alara's heart was pounding. "Which is?" "A man you shouldn't have married." He stood, dropped his napkin on the table, and walked out. Alara sat there alone, surrounded by dead blackthorns and half-eaten food, and wondered what the hell she'd just gotten herself into. Her rooms were on the 3rd floor, at the end of a long hallway lined with closed doors. The steward, a thin, nervous man named Peters, showed her inside, explained where everything was, and then fled like the house was on fire. Alara locked the door behind him and leaned against it, eyes closed, trying to breathe. The room was beautiful. Of course it was. High ceilings, tall windows, a bed big enough to get lost in. Everything was done in shades of cream and gold, soft and warm, and nothing like the rest of the house. It felt like a cage made of silk. Alara walked to the window and looked out. The gardens stretched below her, dark and still. Beyond them, she could see the edge of the estate, the high walls, the gates. And beyond that, nothing but night. She pressed her forehead against the glass and let herself admit, just for a moment, how terrified she was. Then she straightened, locked the feeling away, and started unpacking. She was halfway through when she found it. The necklace. The one from the first box. She'd left it at home, she was sure of it. But there it was, sitting on top of her folded nightgowns like it had been waiting for her. Alara picked it up, turned it over in her hands, and saw for the first time the inscription carved into the back of the silver setting. 3 words, barely visible. Trust no one. Alara didn't sleep that night. She lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, the necklace clutched in her fist. Trust no one. The words had burned themselves into her brain, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw them again, sharp, deliberate, carved by someone who wanted her to know something. But what? And who? When dawn finally crept through the windows, pale and exhausted, Alara gave up. She got dressed, chose a simple day dress from the wardrobe someone had filled while she wasn't looking, and stepped out into the hallway. The house was different in daylight. Still massive, still cold, but the shadows had retreated enough that she could see details she'd missed the night before. The wallpaper was hand-painted, intricate patterns of thorns and roses that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. The floors were polished to a mirror shine. And the portraits. There were so many portraits. Dead blackthorns lined the walls, generation after generation of severe faces and cold eyes. Alara walked past them slowly, studying each one. The men all looked like Darian, tall, dark-haired, sharp-featured. The women looked scared. She stopped in front of the last portrait in the row. A man who could have been Darian's twin, except older, harder. His eyes were the same pale shade, but there was something cruel in them, something mean. The plaque beneath read, Lord Edmund Blackthorne, 1801 to 1851, Darian's father. Admiring the family gallery? Alara spun around. Darian stood at the end of the hallway, already dressed for the day in dark trousers and a crisp white shirt. He looked like he'd been awake for hours. I couldn't sleep, she said. Neither could I. He walked toward her, slow and measured. You're up early. So are you. I'm always up early. He stopped beside her, looking up at his father's portrait. His expression was unreadable. Did you find everything you needed? In your rooms? Alara's hand went to her pocket, where she'd shoved the necklace. Yes, thank you. Good. He was quiet for a moment, still staring at the portrait. Then, he was a bastard. Alara blinked. What? My father. Darian's voice was flat, emotionless. Edmund Blackthorne, decorated war hero, respected member of Parliament, beloved by the Queen herself. And behind closed doors, an absolute bastard. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked me to talk to you. He finally looked at her. This is me talking. Alara's heart was beating too fast. What did he do? What didn't he do? Darian's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. He drank. He gambled. He kept mistresses in the city and beat my mother when she complained. When she died, when I was 12, he told me it was my fault for being weak, for not being the son he deserved. Darian, he's dead now, has been for 5 years, heart attack in his study, whiskey glass still in his hand. Darian's eyes were cold. I didn't cry at his funeral. I didn't feel anything at all. Alara stared at him, at this man who just stripped himself bare in the middle of a hallway like it was nothing. Why are you telling me this? Because you should know what you married into. He turned to face her fully. This family is rotten, Alara. Has been for generations, and I'm part of that rot whether I like it or not. You're not your father. How do you know? Because you're standing here telling me about him. Because you gave me my own rooms. Because you... She stopped, searching for the right words. Because you're trying. Darian looked at her like she'd just said something in a foreign language. Trying? Not to be him. He was quiet for a long time. Then he turned and started walking. Come on, I'll show you the rest of the house. Alara followed. The tour took over an hour. Darian led her through room after room, drawing rooms, sitting rooms, a library that stretched 2 stories high and smelled like old paper and tobacco. He explained the history of each space, pointed out which furniture had been there for centuries and which he'd replaced. His voice was steady, controlled, but Alara noticed the way he avoided certain doors, certain hallways. What's up there? She asked, pointing to a staircase that curved up into darkness. The east wing. Darian didn't slow down. It's closed off. Why? Because no one uses it. But what's in it? He stopped walking, turned to look at her with an expression that made her take a step back. Nothing you need to see. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. His tone was final. Stay out of the east wing, Alara. I mean it. She wanted to argue, wanted to push, but something in his eyes stopped her. Fine, she said. He nodded once and kept walking. They ended up in the gardens, acres of manicured lawns and geometric flower beds that looked like they'd been designed by someone with a ruler and no imagination. Alara walked beside Darian in silence, trying to reconcile the man next to her with the monster everyone said he was. Can I ask you something? She said finally. You're going to anyway. The woman who threw herself in the river, what was her name? Darian's jaw tightened. Vivian. Did you love her? No. Did she love you? She thought she did. He stopped by a fountain, staring down at the water. We met at a ball. She was persistent. Showed up at the estate, wrote letters, convinced herself we had something that didn't exist. When I told her I wasn't interested, she wouldn't accept it, kept saying I'd change my mind, that I just needed time. And then I got engaged to Catherine. His voice was barely above a whisper. Vivian heard about it, came to the estate, screaming, crying, said if she couldn't have me, no one would. I had her escorted off the property. 3 days later, they found her body in the Thames. Alara felt sick. That's not your fault. Isn't it? No, you can't control what someone else does. Maybe. He looked at her. But I could have been kinder. I could have let her down easier instead of just cutting her off. Maybe she'd still be alive. Or maybe she'd have kept coming back until something worse happened. Alara moved closer. You can't carry that. I carry everything, Darian said quietly. It's what blackthorns do. Before Alara could respond, footsteps crunched on gravel behind them. She turned to see Peters hurrying toward them, looking even more nervous than usual. Your Grace, he panted. Forgiveness, but there's a visitor. He's waiting in the drawing room. Darian's expression went cold. Who? Lord Ashford, sir. Every muscle in Darian's body went rigid. What does he want? He didn't say, just that it was urgent. Darian looked at Alara. Stay here. Why? Who's Lord Ashford? Someone you don't want to meet. He was already walking away. Peters will take you back to your rooms. I'm not a child, Darian. I can... Stay. Here. He didn't look back. That's not a request. And then he was gone, striding across the gardens like he was heading into battle. Peters cleared his throat awkwardly. Mrs. Blackthorne, if you'll follow me... No! Alara watched Darian disappear into the house. I'm going to find out who Lord Ashford is. And you're going to help me. Peters went pale. Madam, I really don't think... I'm not asking. She turned to face him. You work for this family. That means you work for me now too. So tell me, who is Lord Ashford, and why does he make my husband look like he's seen a ghost? Peters swallowed hard. He's He was Lord Edmund's closest friend. They served together in the war. After Lord Edmund died, Lord Ashford tried to contest the will, said his grace wasn't fit to inherit, that he was unstable, dangerous. The courts dismissed it, but what? But Lord Ashford never stopped believing it. Peters looked miserable. He's been spreading rumors for years about his grace, about what happened to Miss Catherine, about other things. What other things? Peters shook his head. I've already said too much. Peters, please, madam, if His Grace finds out I told you any of this, he'll dismiss me. I have a family to feed. Alara studied him, saw the genuine fear in his eyes. Fine, but if I ask you a direct question later, you're going to answer it. Understand? Yes, madam. Good. Now take me inside. I want to be close enough to hear when they start shouting. Peters looked like he might cry. Yes, madam. They went in through a side entrance, Peters leading her down a servants' corridor that ran parallel to the main hallway. He stopped outside a door, pressed his finger to his lips, and pointed. Alara moved closer and heard voices, Darian's, low and controlled, and another man's, older, rough like sandpaper. Can't just show up here, Ashford. I can do whatever I damn well please, boy. This was my house long before it was yours. It was never your house. It was my father's. Now it's mine. You have no claim here. Don't I? The other man laughed. It was an ugly sound. I know what you did, Darian. I know what really happened to that girl. Silence, then, get out. Make me. I said get out. Or what? You'll kill me too? Add me to the list? Alara's breath caught. She leaned closer, pressing her ear against the door. I didn't kill anyone, Darian said. Each word was carved from ice. No? Then where's Catherine? Where did she go? I don't know. Liar. You argued with her the night before the wedding. Witnesses heard you. She was crying, begging you for something, and you refused. The next morning, she was gone. No note, no explanation, just vanished. And you want me to believe you had nothing to do with it? Believe whatever you want. I'm done defending myself to you. You should be defending yourself to a judge. Ashford's voice dropped. But you're lucky. The Blackthorn name still carries weight, still opens doors, buys silence. How long do you think that will last? As long as it needs to. And what about your new wife? Does she know what she married, or did you buy her silence too? The sound of something hitting a wall. Alara jumped back. Don't. Darian's voice was shaking now. Don't you dare bring her into this. Why not? She's part of it now, part of this cursed family. You think you can protect her? Ashford laughed again. You couldn't protect Catherine. You couldn't protect your mother. What makes you think? The door flew open. Darian stood there, breathing hard, his face white with rage. He looked at Alara, and something flickered in his eyes, shock, maybe, or betrayal. I told you to stay in the gardens, he said quietly. I know. Why didn't you? Because I needed to hear this. Behind Darian, she could see the drawing room. A man stood by the fireplace, tall, gray-haired, with a face like a hawk and eyes that gleamed with malicious satisfaction when they landed on her. Well, well, Ashford said. The bride. Younger than I expected, prettier too. Tell me, my dear, did he mention that his last fiancée disappeared? Or did he save that for the wedding night? Shut up, Darian said, but Alara stepped past him into the room. He told me about Catherine, and about Vivian, and about his father. Ashford's smile widened. Did he tell you how Edmund really died? Heart attack, Alara said, in his study. That's the official story, yes. Very neat, very convenient. Ashford walked toward her. But the servants whispered. They said Edmund was found with bruises on his neck, that the whiskey glass was on the floor, not in his hand, that the door was locked from the outside. Alara's pulse hammered in her ears. What are you saying? I'm saying your husband murdered his own father. The words hung in the air like poison. Alara turned to look at Darian. His face was expressionless, but his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. Did you? She asked. Darian didn't answer. Did you kill him? Leave, Darian said to Ashford. Now. Answer her question first. Get out. Ashford shrugged, heading for the door, but he stopped beside Alara, leaning in close enough that she could smell tobacco and old wine on his breath. "Ask him about the East Wing," he whispered. "Ask him what he keeps locked up there." Then he was gone. Alara and Darian stood in the drawing room, silence stretching between them like a chasm. "Did you kill your father?" Alara asked again. Darian looked at her, really looked, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something break behind his eyes. "Yes," he said. The world tilted. "He was beating one of the maids," Darian continued, his voice hollow. "She was 16. I came home early from London, heard her screaming. By the time I got to his study, she was unconscious on the floor, and he was standing over her with his belt in his hand. I grabbed him, told him to stop. He laughed. Said I was weak, just like my mother. Said the maid deserved it." Alara couldn't breathe. "I didn't plan it," Darian said. I put my hands on his throat, and I couldn't let go. By the time I realized what I was doing, he was dead. I locked the door, poured whiskey on the floor, staged it to look like an accident, and then I paid off the maid, paid off the servants, paid off anyone who might have heard anything. The bruises, I covered them, told the coroner he must have hit his head when he fell, gave him enough money that he didn't ask questions. Darian's hands were shaking now. "So yes, Alara, I killed my father. I'm a murderer. That's what you married." Alara stared at him, at this man who'd just confessed to murder like he was reciting a grocery list, and she waited to feel horrified, disgusted, afraid, but all she felt was rage. "He deserved it," she said. Darian's head snapped up. "What?" "Your father, he deserved it." Alara stepped closer. "He beat your mother, beat you, beat a 16-year-old girl, and you stopped him. That's not murder. That's justice?" Darian's laugh was bitter. "Is that what you're going to call it?" "I'm going to call it survival." She grabbed his hands, forced him to look at her. "You were protecting someone. You did what you had to do." "I killed a man, Alara." "You killed a monster." "What's the difference?" She didn't have an answer for that. They stood there, hands clasped, the truth hanging between them like something alive and wounded. Finally, Darian pulled away. "You should leave," he said quietly. "I'll arrange for a carriage, send you back to your family. We can annul the marriage, say it was never consummated. You'll be free." "I don't want to be free." "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do." Alara's voice was steady. "I'm saying I'm not leaving." "Why not?" "Because you're not the only one who's done things they regret." She took a breath. "When I was 17, there was a man, a friend of my father's. He came to the house one night, drunk, and he cornered me in the hallway, tried to—" She stopped, swallowed. "I fought back. Hit him with a candlestick. He fell, cracked his head on the floor. I thought I'd killed him." Darian was staring at her. "Turns out he was just unconscious," Alara continued. "But for 3 days I thought I was a murderer. Thought they'd hang me for it. And you know what I felt?" "What?" "Relief." Her eyes were burning. "Because he deserved it. Because I'd rather be a murderer than a victim." Darian reached out slowly like he was afraid she might disappear and touched her face. "You're not a murderer. Neither are you. Alara, we're survivors, Darian, both of us. And I'm not leaving you to face this alone." He looked at her like she was something impossible, something he didn't deserve. Then he kissed her. It wasn't like the kiss at the altar, brief and controlled and meaningless. This was desperate, hungry, like he was drowning and she was air. Alara kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, and felt something inside her chest crack open. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I don't know how to do this," Darian said against her mouth. "Neither do I." "What if I ruin you?" "What if I ruin you first?" He laughed. Actually laughed. It was rough and unpracticed, but it was real. And then the front door slammed open. They sprang apart. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, running footsteps. Peters appeared in the doorway, his face sheet white. "Your Grace," he gasped. "There's been an incident." Darian's expression went cold. What kind of incident? A fire in the village. The constable says it's arson. Where? The old Ashford cottage, the one on the edge of the estate. Alara felt ice slide down her spine. Ashford? He's been living there since Lord Edmund died, Peters said. Refused to leave the property, said he had as much right to it as anyone. Is he hurt? Darian asked. They don't know, sir. The cottage is still burning, but Peters hesitated. The constable says they found something. In the garden. What? A message, carved into the dirt. Peters looked sick. It says, "You're next." The room went silent. Darian turned to Alara. Go to your rooms, lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. What are you going to do? What I should have done years ago. He grabbed his coat off a chair. I'm going to end this. Darian. But he was already gone, Peters scrambling after him. Alara stood alone in the drawing room, her heart pounding, and made a decision. She wasn't going to her rooms. She was going to the East Wing. Because whatever Darian was hiding up there, whatever he'd locked away and forbidden her to see, it was connected to all of this. She could feel it. And if someone was threatening her husband, threatening their lives, she needed to know why, even if the truth destroyed them both. The East Wing staircase was dark. Alara stood at the bottom, staring up into shadows that seemed to swallow the light whole. Her hand gripped the banister, knuckles white, and she tried to convince herself this was a terrible idea. It didn't work. She climbed. The stairs creaked under her weight, each step louder than the last, echoing off walls that felt too close. The air grew colder as she ascended, carrying a smell she couldn't quite place, dust and something else. Something chemical, sharp. At the top, a hallway stretched into darkness. Doors lined both sides, all closed, all identical. Alara pulled a candle from a wall sconce and held it up, watching shadows dance and twist. The first 3 doors were locked. The 4th opened. Inside was a bedroom. A woman's bedroom, frozen in time. The furniture was covered in white sheets, but Alara could see the shapes underneath, a vanity, a wardrobe, a 4-poster bed. Dust lay thick on everything, undisturbed for years. On the vanity, partially visible beneath its sheet, sat a hairbrush. Dark strands still clung to the bristles. Alara's stomach turned. She backed out, pulled the door shut. The 5th door was locked, so was the 6th. The 7th opened onto a sitting room. More white sheets, more dust. But on a small table by the window, someone had left a book. Recent. No dust on it at all. Alara picked it up. A journal, leather-bound, expensive. She opened it to the first page. Property of Catherine Hartwell. The candle nearly slipped from her hand. She flipped through the pages, scanning the elegant handwriting. Most entries were mundane, social calls, dress fittings, wedding preparations. But toward the end, the tone changed. The handwriting grew erratic, words scratched onto paper like wounds. He won't speak to me. I ask him questions, and he looks through me like I'm made of glass. Mother says I'm being hysterical, that all grooms are nervous. But this isn't nervousness. This is something else. I found letters in his study, from his father. Terrible things, things I can't repeat even here. What kind of man was Edmund Blackthorne? What kind of man is his son? I tried to leave today, got as far as the front gate before he found me. He didn't yell, didn't threaten, just asked me to come back inside. Said we needed to talk. I should have kept running. The entries stopped there. 3 pages left blank, and then one final line, written in a hand so shaky Alara could barely read it. He's not what I thought. None of this is. If anyone finds this... The sentence ended mid-word. Alara's hands were shaking. She set the journal down, backed away from it like it might bite. A sound behind her. A footstep. She spun around. Empty hallway. Empty darkness. Hello? Her voice cracked. Is someone there? Silence. Then another footstep. Closer this time. Alara grabbed the candle and ran. She made it 5 steps before a hand closed around her arm. She screamed, twisted, and came face to face with a woman. Old, thin, with gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her eyes were sharp and dark, and they were furious. You shouldn't be here, the woman hissed. Alara tried to pull free. Let go of me. You don't understand what you're doing. what you're risking. Who are you? Someone who's been cleaning up blackthorn messes for 40 years. The woman's grip tightened. Turn around. Go back downstairs. Forget you were ever up here. I can't do that. You can. You will. Who are you? Alara demanded again. The woman stared at her. Then slowly, her grip loosened. Mrs. Davison, I was housekeeper here when Lord Edmund was alive, when Darian was a boy. You knew Catherine. Something flickered in Mrs. Davison's eyes. Yes. What happened to her? Nothing you need to know about. That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll get from me. Mrs. Davison stepped back. His Grace ordered these rooms sealed for good reason. You need to respect that. Why? What's he hiding? Not hiding, protecting. The old woman's face softened slightly. You seem like a smart girl, smart enough to know when to stop asking questions. And if I'm not? Mrs. Davison looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a key, old brass, worn smooth from use. End of the hall, she said quietly. Last door on the left. That's where you'll find your answers. But Mrs. Blackthorne? She pressed the key into Alara's palm. Some doors are locked for a reason. Once you open them, you can't close them again. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing down the stairs like a ghost. Alara stood in the darkness, the key heavy in her hand, and knew she was about to make a choice she couldn't take back. She walked to the end of the hall. The last door on the left was different from the others, heavier, reinforced. And when Alara pressed her ear against it, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Crying. Soft, broken, barely audible. But unmistakably human. Her hand shook as she fitted the key into the lock. The door swung open. Inside was a room. Small, plain, with a single narrow bed and a window covered by heavy curtains. And on the bed, curled into a ball, was a woman. She was thin. Too thin. Her dark hair hung limp around her face, and her clothes looked like they hadn't been changed in days. But when she lifted her head and looked at Alara, her eyes were alert, aware, and absolutely terrified. Please, she whispered, please don't tell him you found me. Alara's mind was racing. Who are you? Catherine. The woman's laugh was broken, or what's left of her. The world tilted. Alara grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. You're alive. Barely. But everyone thinks they said you disappeared. That Darian killed me? Catherine sat up slowly, like her bones hurt. That's what he wanted them to think. Easier that way. Cleaner. I don't understand. Of course you don't. Catherine wrapped her arms around herself. You're new, fresh. You haven't seen what he's capable of yet. Alara's throat felt tight. What did he do to you? What didn't he do? Catherine's voice was hollow. He courted me, proposed, convinced me I was special, that he'd changed, that I could fix him. And then 2 weeks before the wedding, I found out the truth. What truth? That he's exactly like his father. Catherine looked up at her. Edmund Blackthorne was a monster, Mrs. Blackthorne. Beat his wife until she stopped fighting back. Beat his son until he learned to hide the bruises. And when Darian grew up, when he inherited everything, he didn't break the cycle. He perfected it. Alara shook her head. No, that's not... He told me about his father, about what he did. I'm sure he did. He's very good at telling partial truths. Catherine stood up, swaying slightly. Did he tell you about the maids? The ones who quit without notice? The ones who left in the middle of the night and never came back? He said, did he tell you about the debts? Not your father's. His. Gambling debts so deep he had to marry money or lose everything? Alara felt sick. You're lying. Am I? Catherine walked toward her. Then explain why I'm locked in this room. Why he's kept me prisoner for 2 years. 2 years. 23 months. 14 days. Catherine's smile was terrible. I count. It's all I have left. Alara's mind was spinning. Why didn't you escape? Why didn't you... Catherine laughed. I tried 6 times. He caught me every time. And every time he moved me to a room farther from the exits, higher up, harder to reach. She gestured around them. This is the last one. Next time I try, he'll kill me. He told me so. I don't believe you. Then go. Catherine sat back down on the bed. Walk out that door. Go back to your beautiful rooms and your beautiful dress and pretend you never saw me. It's what everyone else does. Mrs. Davison knows you're here. Mrs. Davison brought me dinner last night. Catherine's voice was flat. She's known from the beginning. They all have. Alara's legs felt weak. She leaned against the wall, trying to breathe. Why are you telling me this? Because you're next. Catherine looked at her with something like pity. He'll be sweet at first, attentive. He'll make you feel like you matter. And then, slowly, the doors will start locking. The windows will get bars. And one day you'll wake up and realize you're not a wife. You're a prisoner. No. Yes. Catherine's eyes were dead. Run, Mrs. Blackthorne, while you still can. Alara pushed off the wall. I need to talk to him. He'll lie. Then I'll know. Will you? Catherine called after her. Or will you believe him? Because he's very, very good at making you believe. Alara didn't answer. She was already running. She flew down the stairs, through the hallways, past portraits of dead Blackthorns who all looked like they knew something she didn't. Her mind was a storm. Catherine's words kept circling, sharp and cutting. Prisoner, monster, liar. But she'd seen Darian's face when he talked about his father. Seen the pain, the guilt, the self-hatred. That wasn't an act. It couldn't be. Could it? She made it to the main entrance just as Darian came through the door. He was covered in soot. His shirt was torn, his face smudged with ash, and when he saw her, his eyes went wide. Alara, what are you? You were supposed to stay in your rooms. I went to the east wing. He went very still. What? I found her, Darian. I found Catherine. The color drained from his face. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. I can't. It's not what you think. She said you're keeping her prisoner, that you've had her locked up for 2 years. That's not the whole story. Then tell me the whole story, Alara's voice cracked. Tell me the truth. Darian looked at her for a long moment. Then he closed the door behind him and locked it. Alara's heart started pounding. You want the truth? He said quietly. Fine. Catherine's alive. She's in the East Wing. And yes, I've kept her there. Why? Because she tried to kill herself. The words came out flat. 3 times, once with poison, once with a razor, once by throwing herself down the main staircase, and every time I stopped her. Alara stared at him. She didn't want to marry me, Darian continued. Never did. Her father forced her into it, same as yours did. But Catherine, she couldn't handle it. Couldn't handle this house, this name, the expectations. 2 weeks before the wedding, she had a breakdown. Started screaming, breaking things. Said she'd rather die than be my wife. So you locked her up. I saved her life. His voice rose. I brought in doctors, specialists, people who could help her. But she wouldn't take the medicine, wouldn't eat, wouldn't do anything but try to hurt herself. So yes, I locked her in a room where she couldn't reach anything sharp, anything dangerous, where someone could watch her every hour of every day. For 2 years? Because she's not better. Darian ran a hand through his hair. She's worse. She hallucinates. Talks to people who aren't there. Last month she convinced herself I was poisoning her food and refused to eat for 6 days. The only reason she's still alive is because I force-fed her through a tube. Alara felt tears burning her eyes. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you tell who? The authorities? They'd have locked her in an asylum, put her in a cage and drugged her until she stopped being human. Her family? They disowned her the second she tried to break the engagement. She has no one, Alara. No one but me, and I'm doing the best I can. She says you're like your father. Darian flinched like she'd slapped him. I know. Are you? I don't know. His voice broke. I look at her, at what she's become, and I wonder if I did that. If I'm the poison that destroyed her. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am just like him. Alara stepped forward. Why didn't you send her away? Find somewhere safe. I tried. Every facility I contacted said the same thing. They couldn't help her. That she needed to be institutionalized, restrained, probably for the rest of her life. Darian's hands were shaking. So I kept her here, in a house that's falling apart, with servants who are terrified of her, and a housekeeper who looks at me like I'm a monster every time she brings Catherine her meals. And maybe I am. Maybe that's exactly what I am. No. Alara grabbed his face, forced him to look at her. You're not. You're trying to help her. Am I? Or am I just keeping her locked up so no one finds out what I did? What did you do? He pulled away. The night she had her breakdown, she said something I can't forget. What? She said my father visited her the week before he died, came to her family's house and told her she needed to run, that marrying me would destroy her. Alara's blood went cold. Why would he say that? I don't know. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was trying to sabotage the marriage. Or maybe... Darian's voice dropped to a whisper. Maybe he knew something I don't. Maybe he saw something in me that he recognized. Darian. My father was a monster, Alara, and I killed him, put my hands around his throat and squeezed until he stopped breathing. What if Catherine's right? What if I'm... A crash from upstairs cut him off, then a scream. They both looked up. Catherine, Darian breathed. He ran. Alara followed. They burst into the east wing just as Mrs. Davison appeared at the top of the stairs, her face white. She's gone, the old woman said. I checked her room 5 minutes ago and she was sleeping. Now the door's open and she's... Another scream, this one from outside. Darian sprinted to the window and looked out. No, he whispered. No, no, no. Alara looked past him and felt her heart stop. Catherine was on the roof, 3 stories up, standing on the edge, arms spread wide like wings, and she was smiling. Darian was already moving. He grabbed Alara's arm as he passed. Get Peters. Tell him to bring blankets, mattresses, anything soft. Put them under the east side of the house. Darian, she's going to... I know. Just do it. Now. Alara ran. She found Peters in the kitchens and screamed instructions at him. He went pale but didn't argue, just started yelling at the other servants to move. Alara ran back upstairs. Darian had made it to the roof. She could see him through a window, inching toward Catherine, hands raised, talking in a low, steady voice. Catherine, look at me. Just look at me. Catherine turned. Her smile widened. You came. Of course I came. Now step back from the edge. Why? You want to keep me locked up longer? I want to keep you alive. I don't want to be alive. Her voice was eerily calm. Not like this. Not trapped in that room, in my own head. I'm tired, Darian. I know you're tired. But this isn't the answer. Yes, it is. She looked down at the ground below. It's the only answer I have left. Please, Darian took another step. Please don't do this. Why do you care? You don't love me. You never did. No, but I don't want you to die. Liar. Catherine laughed. You've wanted me dead since the day we met. One less problem. One less person who knows what you really are. That's not true. Isn't it? She spread her arms wider. Then why keep me locked up? Why not just let me go? Because you'd hurt yourself. So? It's my life. Not while you're in my care. I don't want to be in your care. The scream tore out of her. I want to be free. Darian lunged for her. She stepped back. For one horrible second, she hung in empty air. Then gravity took her. Alara heard herself scream. Darian threw himself forward, arm outstretched, and caught Catherine's wrist. The impact nearly pulled him over the edge. He slammed down on his stomach, Catherine dangling from his grip, 3 stories of nothing beneath her feet. Let go, Catherine said. She wasn't struggling, wasn't trying to pull herself up, just hanging there, looking up at him with dead eyes. Please, let go. No. Darian, I'm not letting go. His voice was shaking. I'm not my father. I'm not letting you fall. You can't save me. Watch me. He started pulling, inch by inch, his face twisted with effort, dragging her back up. Catherine fought him, twisted, tried to wrench her wrist free. Stop. Stop, she sobbed. Stop, please, just let me. No! Alara ran onto the roof. She grabbed Darian's other arm, added her weight, and together they hauled Catherine over the edge. She collapsed on the roof, gasping, crying, and Darian pulled her against his chest, holding her like she might dissolve. I've got you, he whispered. I've got you. You're safe. I don't want to be safe. Catherine's voice was muffled against his shirt. I want to be dead. I know, but you're not. You're here, and I'm not giving up on you. They sat there as the sun set, 3 broken people on a roof, and Alara finally understood. Darian wasn't a monster. He was a man trying desperately not to become one, and failing, and trying anyway. Catherine was eventually sedated and carried back to her room. Mrs. Davison promised to sit with her through the night, and Darian hired 2 more nurses to help watch her in shifts. Now he and Alara sat in his study, neither speaking, both staring at nothing. I'm sorry, Darian said finally. You shouldn't have had to see that. I'm glad I did. He looked at her. Why? Because now I understand. Alara leaned forward. You're not keeping her prisoner. You're keeping her alive. Same thing. No, it's not. She took his hand. You're doing what you think is right, even though it's destroying you, even though everyone thinks you're a monster for it. Maybe they're right. They're not. Darian's eyes were red. You don't know that. Yes, I do. She squeezed his hand. Because a real monster wouldn't have caught her. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Darian spoke, his voice barely audible. Ashford knows about Catherine. Alara went cold. What? That's why he's doing this, the fire, the threats. He knows she's alive, and he's going to use it to destroy me. Darian looked at her. He'll say I kidnapped her, that I've been torturing her for years, and no one will believe the truth. We'll make them believe. How? By showing them Catherine. She can barely speak without hallucinating. They'll see her and assume I did that to her. Then we find proof, evidence that you've been trying to help her. I paid everyone off, Alara. Doctors, nurses, suppliers. All cash, all under the table. If this goes to court, it'll look exactly like I was covering something up. Because you were. Exactly. He pulled his hand free, stood up, started pacing. Ashford's going to expose this, and when he does, I'll lose everything. The estate, the title, probably my freedom. They'll lock me up and send Catherine to an asylum, and you... He stopped, looked at her. You'll be destroyed by association. Your family will be ruined all over again. Alara stood up. Then we don't let him expose it. How? We expose it first. Her mind was racing. We tell the truth, all of it, before he can twist it into something else. No one will believe us. They might, if we do it right. If we show them Catherine, show them the doctor's reports, show them... The door to the study slammed open. Peter stood there, breathing hard, holding a piece of paper. Your Grace, he gasped. This just arrived, by courier. Darian took it, read it, and went white. What? Alara moved closer. What does it say? He handed it to her. The handwriting was elegant, mocking. Your wife needs to know the whole truth before she decides to stand beside you. Ask her about the night Edmund really died. Ask her who else was in that room. And ask yourself why you're so certain you were alone when you killed him. Tomorrow night. The old chapel. Midnight. Come alone, or I tell the world everything. Alara's hands were shaking. What does this mean? Who else was in the room? Darian's face was ashen. I don't know. You don't remember? He stopped, closed his eyes. It was 5 years ago. I was angry, I was drunk, and when I came to, my father was dead on the floor. I assumed but what if you didn't kill him? Alara finished. They stared at each other. Ashford was there that night, Darian said slowly. He came for dinner. He and my father drank in the study for hours. When I got home, Ashford's carriage was still outside. But I never saw him leave. So he could have still been in the house, in the room. Could he have killed my father? And let me think I did it? Darian's voice was rising. Spent 5 years watching me carry that guilt while he... Another crash. This one from downstairs, then voices, shouting. Darian and Alara ran. They reached the main entrance just as the front door burst open. Lord Ashford stood there, flanked by 4 men in constable uniforms. His smile was triumphant. "Darian Blackthorne," he said, "you're under arrest for the murder of Edmund Blackthorne and the unlawful imprisonment of Catherine Hartwell." Darian didn't move. "You can't prove either of those things." "Can't I?" Ashford pulled out a document. "I have statements from 3 servants willing to testify you killed your father. And I have Catherine herself, who I'm told is locked in the East Wing as we speak. She's not in prison. She's under medical care. That's for a judge to decide." Ashford gestured to the constables. "Take him." They moved forward. Alara stepped in front of Darian. "No," she said. Ashford raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. No." Alara's voice was shaking but firm. "You're not taking him anywhere." "Mrs. Blackthorne, I understand you're upset, but I'm not upset. I'm angry." She moved closer. "You did this. You killed Edmund Blackthorne, and you've let Darian believe he was responsible for 5 years. And now you're trying to finish what you started." Ashford's smile never wavered. "That's quite an accusation. It's the truth. Prove it." "I will." Alara pulled the note from her pocket. "You sent this 30 minutes ago. How did you know we'd be home? How did you know exactly when to arrive with the constables, unless you were watching the house?" "I wasn't." "And how did you know Catherine was in the East Wing? Only 4 people know that. Darian, Mrs. Davison, me, and whoever's been feeding you information." Ashford's smile faltered, just for a second. "You've had someone inside this house," Alara continued. "Someone who's been reporting back to you. Someone who helped you plan all of this." "This is ridiculous." "Is it? Then explain how you knew about the fight between Darian and Catherine. You said there were witnesses, but that fight happened in a closed room with no one else present." Unless you were there." Alara's heart was hammering. "Unless you were in the house that night. The night Edmund died. The night Catherine had her breakdown. You were there for both." The room went silent. Ashford's face had gone cold. "You're grasping at straws, my dear." "Am I? Then let's ask Catherine." Alara turned to one of the constables. "Go to the East Wing, 3rd floor, last door on the left. Bring her down here. Let's see what she remembers." "Don't," Ashford said sharply. Everyone looked at him. "Don't?" Alara repeated. "Why not? I thought you wanted her testimony." "I do, but she's unstable. Moving her could what? Upset your carefully constructed narrative?" Alara stepped closer. "You don't want her down here because she'll tell them the truth. That you were the one who pushed her over the edge. That you were the one who—" Ashford's hand shot out and grabbed her throat. Darian roared and lunged, but the constables held him back. Ashford's face was inches from Alara's, his grip tight enough to bruise. "You," he hissed, "should have stayed quiet." Alara couldn't breathe. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. "Lord Ashford!" One of the constables moved forward. "Release her!" But Ashford wasn't listening. His eyes were wild, unfocused. "Edmund promised me this estate, promised me everything, and then he changed his will, gave it all to his monster of a son. Do you know what that did to me? What I sacrificed for this family? Let her go!" Darian was fighting against the constables now, desperate. "I killed him," Ashford continued, his voice rising. "Crushed his throat while he was drunk and unconscious. And when Darian came home, when I saw him standing there staring at the body, I knew he'd think he'd done it. All I had to do was leave. Let him carry the guilt. Let him destroy himself." Alara's vision was fading. She clawed at Ashford's hand, but he was too strong. "And it worked," Ashford laughed. "For 5 years it worked perfectly, until you showed up, until you made him think he could be saved." One of the constables finally moved, grabbing Ashford's arm. "Sir, stop!" Ashford shoved him away with surprising strength. "She ruined everything. A gunshot cracked through the air. Ashford's grip loosened. Alara fell, gasping, clutching her throat. Ashford stumbled backwards, staring down at the red spreading across his chest. Behind him, in the doorway, Mrs. Davison stood holding an old pistol. Her hands were steady. "That's enough," the old woman said quietly. Ashford collapsed. The room erupted. Constables shouted, moving to secure Mrs. Davison and check Ashford's pulse. Darian broke free and dropped to his knees beside Alara, pulling her against him. "Are you all right? Talk to me." "Alara, please." "I'm okay," she croaked. "I'm okay." He buried his face in her hair. She felt him shaking. One of the constables looked up from Ashford's body. "He's dead." Mrs. Davison set the gun down carefully. "He was going to kill her. I couldn't let him do that." "Ma'am, you're going to need to come with us." "I understand." The old woman looked at Darian. "I'm sorry, Your Grace. I should have told you years ago what I saw, what he did. But he threatened my family, and I was afraid." Darian stood slowly, still holding Alara. "What did you see?" "Everything." Mrs. Davison's eyes were wet. "I was bringing your father his evening tea when I heard arguing. Lord Ashford was shouting about the will, about being cheated, and then it went quiet. When I looked through the door, I saw him standing over Lord Edmund's body, saw him arrange it to look like an accident, saw him leave through the servant's entrance. And when I came home, you walked right past me, went straight to the study. I heard you scream, heard you call for help." Mrs. Davison's voice broke. "I should have said something then, but he found me the next day. Said if I spoke, he'd hurt my daughter, my grandchildren. So I stayed quiet. Watched you carry that guilt for 5 years. I'm so sorry." Darian stared at her, then quietly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For saving my wife." Mrs. Davison nodded once. Then she let the constables lead her away. Alara and Darian stood in the entrance hall, surrounded by chaos. Blood on the floor, servants crying, constables taking statements, and held each other like they were the only solid things left in the world. "Is it over?" Alara whispered. Darian looked down at Ashford's body. "I don't know. Maybe." He confessed. They all heard him. "I know." "So you're free. You didn't kill your father. You're not—" "I'm not a murderer." Darian's laugh was shaky. "I spent 5 years thinking I was, hating myself for it. And I wasn't." Alara pulled back to look at him. "How do you feel?" "I don't know." He touched his face like he was checking to make sure it was still his. "I don't know how to feel." "Then we'll figure it out. Together." He looked at her, really looked, and something in his expression shifted. "You stood in front of me when they tried to arrest me." "Of course I did. You could have let them take me, could have walked away. Your family's debts are paid. You don't need me anymore." "Yes, I do." Alara grabbed his shirt. "I need you, and you need me. That's how this works." "I don't deserve you." "Too bad. You're stuck with me." And there, standing in blood and chaos and the wreckage of everything Ashford had tried to destroy, Darian Blackthorne smiled. It was small, unpracticed, but it was real. And then, from upstairs, a sound that made them both freeze. Catherine's voice, clear and steady for the first time in 2 years. "Is he dead? Is Ashford finally dead?" Bjaya sasi masi. They found Catherine sitting at the top of the east wing stairs, her thin frame wrapped in a blanket, her eyes fixed on the chaos below. She looked different, alert, focused, like someone had flipped a switch inside her head. Darian climbed the stairs slowly, Alara right behind him. "Catherine, is he really dead?" Catherine asked again. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "Or am I hallucinating again?" "He's dead." Darian stopped a few steps below her. "Mrs. Davison shot him." Catherine closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek. "Good." "Catherine, he was there that night." Her eyes snapped open. "The night I had the breakdown. I didn't imagine it. He was really there." Alara sat down beside her. "What happened?" "I was in my room, packing. I decided to leave, to break the engagement. I didn't care what my family said. I couldn't go through with it. Catherine's voice was thin but clear. Ashford appeared in my doorway. I don't know how he got into the house. He just appeared, and he started talking. What did he say? Darian asked quietly. That I needed to marry you, that it was important, that my family was counting on it. Catherine pulled the blanket tighter. I told him I couldn't, that I didn't love you, that forcing this marriage would destroy us both. And he laughed, said love had nothing to do with it. Alara felt cold. What did he mean? He said your father had changed his will, given you everything. And the only way Ashford could get control of the estate was if you had a wife, someone weak, someone he could manipulate, someone who would convince you to make him steward, give him power over the finances. Catherine looked at Darian. I was supposed to be that person. He'd already talked to my father, promised him a fortune if I went through with it. Darian's face had gone white. You're saying the engagement was Ashford's idea from the beginning? Your father's death wasn't random, Darian. Ashford killed him because Edmund was about to change the will again, about to cut you out entirely and give everything to charity. Catherine's hands were shaking harder now. Ashford told me all of this, said I needed to marry you before Edmund's lawyers figured out what he'd done, before anyone started asking questions. And when you refused, he got angry, started yelling, told me I was making a mistake, that he'd ruin my family, destroy everything. Catherine's voice cracked. I tried to push past him. He grabbed me. We fought. He threw me against the wall and my head hit the corner of the dresser. When I woke up, I was in the east wing, locked in that first room, and Darian was standing over me saying I'd tried to kill myself. The silence that followed was crushing. I didn't know, Darian said hoarsely. I came home and found you unconscious, blood everywhere. Ashford was gone. I thought you'd hurt yourself because of me. That's what he wanted you to think. Catherine wiped her eyes. And it worked. You locked me up to keep me safe, and I was too confused, too hurt to explain what really happened. Every time I tried to tell you, the words came out wrong, mixed up with the nightmares and the fear, until I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Alara's chest felt tight. The doctors, the medicines, made it worse. Catherine looked at her hands. I wasn't having a breakdown. I had a head injury. But Ashford had already told everyone I was unstable, that I'd always been fragile. So when the doctors came, they saw what they expected to see, a hysterical woman, and they treated me accordingly. Darian sat down heavily on the stairs. All this time, I thought I was helping you. You were keeping me alive. That counts for something. Catherine's smile was sad. But Ashford was right about one thing. This house does destroy people, just not the way he thought. Footsteps on the stairs below. One of the constables appeared, looking uncomfortable. Excuse me, Your Grace. We need to take statements from everyone who witnessed the incident, including Miss Hartwell. Catherine tensed. I can't go down there with all those people. It's all right, Alara said quickly. We'll stay with you. You don't have to do this alone. You don't understand. They'll look at me and see exactly what Ashford said I was. A mad woman. They won't believe anything I say. They will if we make them listen. Darian stood, offered Catherine his hand. You've been silent for 2 years. It's time they heard your side. Catherine stared at his hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, she took it. They went downstairs together. The entrance hall had been cleared of Ashford's body, but the blood remained, a dark stain on the marble floor that no amount of scrubbing would fully erase. The constables had set up a makeshift interview area in the drawing room, and one by one, they were taking statements from the servants. When Catherine entered, everyone stopped talking. She looked worse in the light, too thin, too pale, her hair tangled and her clothes hanging off her frame. But she held her head high, Darian on one side and Alara on the other, and walked to the chair they'd set up for witnesses. The lead constable cleared his throat. Miss Hartwell, I'm Constable Davies. I need to ask you some questions about Lord Ashford and the events leading up to his death. All right. Catherine's voice was quiet but steady. Can you confirm that you've been living in this house for the past 2 years? Yes. And were you here against your will? Catherine hesitated. Yes and no. Davies frowned. I don't understand. I was locked in a room, but not because I was a prisoner. She looked at Darian. Because I was dangerous to myself. His Grace was trying to keep me from hurting myself further. Further? Lord Ashford assaulted me 2 years ago. I sustained a head injury that led to confusion, memory problems, and what the doctors called hysteria. But it wasn't hysteria. It was trauma. Davies was writing quickly. Lord Ashford assaulted you? Yes. When I tried to break my engagement to His Grace. Ashford wanted the marriage to happen for his own purposes. When I refused, he attacked me. And you're certain of this? Forgive me, Miss Hartwell, but your medical records suggest that I'm insane? Catherine's laugh was bitter. I know what they say, but I'm telling you the truth. Ashford killed Edmund Blackthorne. He orchestrated my engagement to Darian, and when I tried to stop it, he nearly killed me too. Another constable leaned in. If what you're saying is true, why didn't you report this 2 years ago? Because I couldn't. Catherine's composure cracked. I had a head injury. I couldn't think straight, couldn't form coherent sentences. And when I finally could, no one believed me. They thought I was making things up, that I was confused. Even I started to doubt what was real. Darian stepped forward. I have medical records, receipts for medications, payments to specialists, all documenting Catherine's treatment for a head injury, not mental illness. The doctors I consulted all said the same thing. The symptoms would fade with time and proper care. Then why keep her locked up? Because the head injury also caused severe depression and suicidal tendencies. 3 times she tried to kill herself. 3 times I stopped her. I wasn't imprisoning her. I was keeping her alive until she could heal. Davies looked between them. This is a serious allegation. If Lord Ashford did what you claim, he confessed, Alara cut in, before he died. You all heard him. He admitted to killing Edmund Blackthorne. Yes, but... And he attacked me, grabbed my throat, tried to choke me. You saw that too. Alara pulled down the collar of her dress, revealing the dark bruises already forming. This isn't speculation. This happened 20 minutes ago in front of witnesses. Davies looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Blackthorne, I understand you're upset. I'm not upset. I'm angry. Alara moved closer. Ashford spent 5 years destroying my husband, making him believe he was a murderer, manipulating everyone around him, and trying to steal an estate that was never his. And when we finally figured out the truth, he tried to kill me to keep it quiet. So yes, I'm angry. But I'm also right. The room was silent. Finally, Davies sighed. We'll need full statements from everyone. Medical records, financial documents, anything that supports your claims. This will likely go to trial. There won't be a trial. Everyone turned. An older man stood in the doorway, dressed in expensive clothes, carrying a leather case. He had the look of someone used to being obeyed. Who are you? Davies demanded. Marcus Kellerman, Lord Ashford's solicitor. He walked into the room, set his case on a table, and opened it. I've been managing his affairs for 15 years, and I need to make a statement. Darian tensed. What kind of statement? Kellerman pulled out a stack of papers. Lord Ashford came to see me 6 months ago, said he was planning something that might end badly, and he wanted to make sure certain information came to light if anything happened to him. What information? Alara asked. The truth about Edmund Blackthorne's death, about the manipulation of Catherine Hartwell, about his own role in all of it. Kellerman set the papers down. He wrote it all out, signed and witnessed. He called it insurance. Catherine stood up slowly. Insurance against what? Against you, Miss Hartwell, and you, Your Grace. Kellerman looked at Darian. He was afraid you'd eventually figure out what he'd done, and when you did, he wanted to make sure you couldn't touch him without destroying yourselves in the process. I don't understand, Darian said. He documented everything, including the fact that you paid off witnesses, bribed officials, and covered up what you believed was your father's murder. If you ever accused him, he'd release these documents and paint you as a criminal who'd been hiding the truth for years. Alara felt sick. So even dead, he wins? Actually, no. Kellerman smiled slightly. Because he made one critical mistake. He put everything in writing, which means it's now evidence. Evidence that proves he killed Edmund Blackthorne, that he assaulted Miss Hartwell, and that he's been blackmailing and manipulating this family for 5 years. Davies grabbed the papers. This is a confession? More or less, he thought it would protect him. Instead, it destroys any credibility his previous accusations had. Kellerman looked at Darian. You're free, Your Grace. The Crown will almost certainly drop any investigation into your father's death. And Miss Hartwell, he turned to Catherine, you'll finally have proof that you're not insane, that everything you've been saying is true. Catherine sat down hard, like her legs had given out. I'm not crazy? You never were. She started crying, not the broken, desperate sobs from before, but something softer. Relief. Release. Alara knelt beside her, took her hand. You're free. We all are. But Catherine shook her head. I've been locked in a room for 2 years. People think I'm mad. Even with proof, even with his confession. Who's going to believe me? I will. They all looked up. Mrs. Davison stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 constables who were supposed to be guarding her, but she'd clearly talked her way out of custody because she walked right up to Catherine and took her other hand. I'll testify, the old woman said. I'll tell them everything I saw, how Ashford threatened me, how he manipulated everyone in this house, how I stood by and did nothing while you suffered. You were protecting your family, Catherine said. I was a coward. Mrs. Davison's voice was firm. But I'm not anymore. I'll make this right. One of the constables cleared his throat. Ma'am, you're still under arrest for shooting Lord Ashford. I know, but it was self-defense. He was attacking Mrs. Blackthorne. You all saw it. Davies nodded slowly. We did. I expect the charges will be reduced, possibly dismissed entirely. Good. Mrs. Davison straightened. Then I'll be available to testify whenever you need me. Davies looked at the papers Kellerman had provided, then at Catherine, then at Darian. This is going to be complicated. There will be inquiries, investigations. The Crown will want to examine everything. Let them, Darian said. We have nothing to hide anymore. Perhaps, but Your Grace, Davies hesitated. The rumors, the stories about you, even with this evidence, people will talk. Some will never believe you're innocent. I don't care what people believe. Darian looked at Alara. I know the truth. That's enough. But Alara knew it wasn't. She'd seen the fear in the servant's eyes, heard the whispers about the Blackthorne curse. Proof wouldn't erase decades of reputation overnight. They needed something more. She stood up. Constable Davies, when will this information be made public? Once we've verified everything, a few days, perhaps a week. I want to hold a gathering, here, before the official announcement. Everyone stared at her. Alara, Darian said carefully, what are you talking about? We need to control the narrative. If we wait for gossip to spread, people will twist the truth into whatever confirms their existing beliefs. She looked at Catherine. But if we present the facts ourselves, if we show them Catherine, alive and recovering, if we let them see the truth with their own eyes, they'll still call me mad, Catherine said quietly. Maybe. But they'll also see you standing, speaking, fighting back. Alara squeezed her hand. You're not a victim anymore. Catherine, you're a survivor, and people need to see that. Catherine looked uncertain. I don't know if I can face them. You don't have to do it alone. We'll be right there with you. Alara turned to Darian. Both of us. Darian was quiet for a long moment. Then, when? 3 days. Give us time to prepare, to get Catherine stronger, to gather the evidence. Davies frowned. I'm not sure that's wise. The investigation is ongoing, which is exactly why we need to do this. Alara's voice was firm. Before speculation becomes fact, before Ashford's version of events becomes the story everyone believes. Kellerman spoke up. She's right. Public opinion matters, especially for a family like the Blackthornes. If you wait too long, the damage will be irreversible. Davies looked at his fellow constables. We'll need to be present to ensure nothing interferes with the investigation. Of course, Alara said. We have nothing to hide. All right. Davies closed his notebook. 3 days. But this gathering needs to be carefully managed. No theatrics, no manipulations. Just the truth. That's all we're offering, Darian said. The constables left. Kellerman followed, promising to return with more documents. Mrs. Davison was escorted back to temporary holding, but would be released on her own recognizance by morning. And then it was just the three of them, Darian, Elara, and Catherine, standing in a drawing room that smelled like blood and gunpowder and the death of secrets. 3 days, Catherine said softly. Can I be ready in 3 days? You've survived 2 years in hell, Elara said. 3 days is nothing. But what if I can't do it? What if I stand up there and the words won't come? Then we'll speak for you, Darian said. But I don't think that will happen. I think you're stronger than you realize. Catherine looked at him. You really believe that? Yes. Even after everything? Even after I spent 2 years screaming that you were a monster? You were scared, hurt, confused. You had every right to scream. Darian's voice was gentle. But you're not screaming now. You're here. You're fighting. That takes strength. Catherine's eyes filled with tears again. I don't know how to do this, how to be normal again. None of us do, Elara said. But we'll figure it out together. The next 3 days were chaos. Elara sent invitations to every family of consequence within 50 miles. Most accepted out of curiosity. Rumors about Ashford's death were already spreading, and everyone wanted to see what the infamous Duke Blackthorn would say about it. Catherine was moved to a proper bedroom on the second floor. A doctor was brought in. A new one, recommended by Kellerman, with no connection to Ashford's network. He examined Catherine thoroughly and confirmed what Darian had been saying all along. Head trauma, not mental illness. The confusion and hallucinations were side effects that had been exacerbated by the wrong treatments and prolonged isolation. She needs time, the doctor told them. Fresh air, proper food, gentle exercise. The brain can heal if you let it. So they did. Elara spent hours with Catherine, walking the gardens, talking about nothing and everything. Catherine's hand still shook sometimes. Her sentences still tangled when she got tired. But slowly, day by day, she grew stronger. On the second evening, Catherine asked to see the East Wing. Are you sure? Elara asked. I need to. I need to face it. They climbed the stairs together. Catherine walked through the rooms she'd been locked in, touching the furniture, the walls, the windows. When they reached the last room, the one she'd spent the most time in, she stood in the doorway for a long time. I thought I'd die here, she said quietly. But you didn't. No. Catherine stepped inside. I survived? She walked to the window, pulled back the curtains. Light flooded in. I want this room cleared out, she said. Everything. Burn the furniture, replace the curtains. I want it turned into something else. Something that doesn't smell like fear. What should it become? Catherine thought for a moment. A nursery. Elara blinked. A nursery? Not for me. I'm never having children, but someday you will. And when you do, I want them to grow up knowing that even the darkest rooms can be filled with light. Catherine turned to look at her. That's what you did for me. Brought light into the dark. Elara felt tears sting her eyes. Catherine, thank you. Catherine's smile was small but real. For believing me, for not giving up. I should be thanking you. You saved Darian's life by speaking up. We saved each other. Catherine took her hand. That's how survival works. On the third day, the guests started arriving. Carriages lined the drive. Servants rushed to accommodate everyone. The drawing rooms filled with the cream of society, lords and ladies, politicians, magistrates, all of them watching, whispering, waiting to see what scandal would unfold. Elara stood in her bedroom, adjusting her dress for the 5th time. It was deep blue, elegant but not ostentatious. She wanted to look strong, capable, not like someone playing a part. A knock on the door. Darian entered, looking uncomfortable in formal dress. Are you ready? He asked. No, You? Not even close. He walked over, took her hands. We could still call this off. Send everyone home. Handle this quietly. And let Ashford win from the grave. No. Alara squeezed his hands. We're doing this. Alara, if this goes wrong, it won't. You don't know that. Neither do you. So we're going to go down there, tell the truth, and let the pieces fall where they may. She stood on her toes, kissed him quickly. Together. He pulled her close. I don't deserve you. Stop saying that. You deserve everything. She pulled back. Now come on. We have a room full of vultures waiting to pick us apart. Let's not disappoint them. They found Catherine waiting at the top of the main staircase. She wore a simple gray dress that Alara had helped her choose, and her hair was pulled back neatly. She looked thin, fragile, but her eyes were clear. Ready? Alara asked. Catherine took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. Together, the three of them descended the stairs. The crowd went silent as they entered the main drawing room. Every eye turned toward them, and Alara could feel the weight of judgment, curiosity, and anticipation pressing down like a physical force. Darian moved to the center of the room. Thank you all for coming on short notice. I know there have been questions about recent events at Thornfield, about Lord Ashford's death, about Miss Hartwell, about my father's passing 5 years ago. He paused. Tonight, you'll have answers. A murmur ran through the crowd. Most of you know the rumors, Darian continued, that I'm violent, unstable, that I murdered my father and imprisoned my former fiancée. For 5 years, I've let those rumors stand because I thought they were true, because I believed I was capable of the worst things people said about me. He looked at Alara, then at Catherine. I was wrong, and tonight, with the help of my wife and Miss Hartwell, I'm going to tell you what really happened. He spoke for 20 minutes, told them about his father's cruelty, about finding him dead, about assuming he'd killed him in a drunken rage, about Catherine's disappearance and the breakdown he thought he'd caused, about keeping her in the East Wing, trying to help her, failing to see that he was making things worse. And then Alara spoke. About the investigation, about Ashford's confession, about the documents that proved everything Darian had said. Finally, Catherine stepped forward. The room went completely silent. I know what you think of me, she said. Her voice shook but held steady. You think I'm mad, broken, someone to be pitied or feared, and maybe I was, for a while. But I'm not anymore. She told them about Ashford's assault, about the head injury, about 2 years of confusion and fear and believing she was losing her mind. Darian Blackthorne didn't imprison me, she said. He saved my life, and yes, he made mistakes, kept me isolated too long, trusted the wrong doctors. But he was trying. And when someone is drowning, you don't criticize how they're being pulled from the water. You're just grateful they survived. She looked out at the crowd. Lord Ashford was a murderer and a manipulator. He destroyed lives to get what he wanted. But he's gone now. And we're still here. Darian, Alara, and I. And we're asking you to see us for what we are. Not monsters, not victims. Just people trying to survive a legacy that should have died with Edmund Blackthorne. The silence stretched. Then someone started clapping. Alara looked over. An older woman near the back, someone she didn't recognize. The woman stood up. I knew Edmund Blackthorne, she said. He came to dinner at our house once, tried to corner my daughter in the hallway. She was 15 feet... Oh. The woman's voice was steady. When my husband confronted him, Edmund laughed it off, said we should be grateful for his attention. We never spoke of it again because who would believe us? Who would stand against a Blackthorne? She looked at Darian. But you're not him. Anyone can see that. And I, for one, am glad the truth is finally coming out. Another person stood. Then another. One by one, people who'd been hurt by Edmund, manipulated by Ashford, or simply tired of living under the weight of the Blackthorne reputation. Not everyone stood. Some remained seated, faces skeptical. But enough stood that the balance in the room shifted. Constable Davies, who'd been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. I've reviewed all the evidence. Lord Ashford's confession, the medical records, the witness testimonies. As far as the Crown is concerned, this matter is closed. His Grace is innocent of all accusations. A ripple of reaction ran through the crowd. Furthermore, Davies continued, Mrs. Davison will not be charged with murder. Her actions were deemed necessary to prevent a greater crime. She'll be released immediately. More whispers, some approving, some not. But the tide had turned. Alara could feel it. Darian looked around the room. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't expect you to forget everything you've heard about my family. But I'm asking you to give us a chance to be better than what came before, to build something new on this foundation of truth. He reached for Alara's hand on one side, Catherine's on the other. We're not asking for your pity. We're asking for your patience. And maybe, eventually, your respect. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then the older woman who'd spoken first nodded. You have mine, Your Grace. Others echoed her. Not all, but enough. And as the crowd began to disperse, breaking into smaller conversations, Alara felt Darian's hand tighten around hers. Did we just do that? He whispered. I think we did. Catherine was surrounded by a small group of women, all asking questions, offering support. She looked overwhelmed, but not afraid. She's going to be all right, Alara said. So are we, Darian replied. And for the first time since she'd married him, Alara believed it. The gathering didn't end cleanly. People lingered, breaking into clusters of conversation that ranged from supportive to skeptical. Alara watched from the edge of the room as Darian spoke with a group of local magistrates, his posture rigid, but his voice steady. Catherine had retreated to a corner with the older woman who'd stood up first, and from the way Catherine's shoulders had relaxed slightly, the conversation was going better than expected. But not everyone was convinced. Lord Pemberton, a portly man with a face like an angry bulldog, cornered Alara near the refreshment table. Mrs. Blackthorne, a word. Of course, Alara kept her voice pleasant. This is all very convenient, isn't it? Ashford dies, and suddenly your husband is innocent of everything. Pemberton's eyes were hard. Forgive me if I find the timing suspicious. The timing is unfortunate, not suspicious. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence provided by Ashford's own solicitor. How do we know it's genuine? Because Constable Davies verified it. Because multiple witnesses corroborated the confession. Because... Alara stopped, took a breath. Losing her temper wouldn't help. Lord Pemberton, I understand your skepticism, but ask yourself this. What would my husband gain by killing Ashford and then immediately exposing everything? If he wanted to keep secrets buried, he'd have let Ashford live. Pemberton frowned. Unless he panicked. Does my husband strike you as someone who panics? A pause. Pemberton looked across the room at Darian, who was explaining something to the magistrates with careful precision. No, he admitted. No, he doesn't. Then perhaps you should consider that we're telling the truth. Pemberton studied her for a long moment. You're quite formidable, Mrs. Blackthorne. I have to be. I married a man everyone thinks is a monster. And is he? Alara met his gaze directly. No. He's a man who was dealt a terrible hand and did his best with it. That's all any of us can do. Pemberton's expression softened slightly. I'll reserve judgment, but I'll be watching. That's all I ask. He nodded and walked away. Alara exhaled slowly, her hands shaking. One conversation down, dozens more to go. The party finally dispersed around midnight. Servants cleaned up while Darian, Alara, and Catherine collapsed in the library, too exhausted to make it upstairs. That was awful, Catherine said, curled up in an armchair with a blanket. Could have been worse, Darian replied. He was sprawled on the sofa, tie loosened, looking more relaxed than Alara had ever seen him. How? Catherine asked. They could have brought torches. Catherine actually laughed. It was a rusty sound, unpracticed but real. Alara sat on the arm of Darian's sofa. Some of them still don't believe us. Some of them never will, Darian said. But enough do. That's what matters. Is it enough? Catherine pulled the blanket tighter. I mean, what happens now? Do I just go back to my family? Pretend the last 2 years didn't happen? Your family disowned you, Darian said gently. I don't think going back is an option. Then what? I can't stay here forever. People already talk. Alara leaned forward. Why can't you stay? Catherine blinked. Because it's not proper. A single woman living in the same house as a married couple. Nothing about this situation is proper, Alara interrupted. We've already thrown convention out the window. Why stop now? Alara's right, Darian said. You have nowhere else to go, and honestly, after everything that's happened, I'd feel better knowing you're safe. Catherine looked between them. You really mean that? Yes. Even after I spent 2 years calling you a monster? You weren't wrong, Darian said quietly. Maybe not about the reasons, but about the result. I kept you locked up, isolated you, made decisions for you without asking what you wanted. That makes me complicit in your suffering, even if I didn't intend it. Catherine was quiet for a moment. You're not a monster, Darian, but you're not a saint either. You're just human, flawed, and trying. Is that enough? It has to be. It's all any of us have. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, the house settling around them. Finally, Catherine spoke. If I stay, I want to be useful, not a charity case. What do you have in mind? Alara asked. I don't know yet, but I need purpose, something to do besides sit in a room and count the hours. We'll figure it out, Darian said. Together. Catherine nodded, her eyes already drifting closed. Alara and Darian watched her fall asleep, then quietly left the library. In the hallway, Darian pulled Alara close. Thank you. For what? For everything. For standing beside me, for believing in me when no one else did, for being exactly what I needed even when I didn't know I needed it. Alara rested her head against his chest. You would have done the same for me. I hope so, but I'm not sure I'm that brave. You jumped off a roof to save Catherine. I'd say that's pretty brave. That was instinct. What you did, standing in front of those people, defending me, rebuilding my reputation, that takes a different kind of courage. We did it together. Did we? Darian pulled back to look at her. I feel like I've just been following your lead. Good, keep doing that. He laughed, actually laughed, and kissed her. They went upstairs together. The next morning brought letters, dozens of them, some supportive, some vicious. The local newspaper ran a front-page story. Duke Blackthorne cleared of murder, Ashford exposed as killer. The article was surprisingly fair, laying out the facts without embellishment, but the society pages were less kind. Scandal at Thornfield, mad fiancé emerges from captivity. Duke's wife defends husband's dark past. The Blackthorne curse. Will this generation break it or become it? Alara read them all over breakfast, her jaw tightening with each headline. Stop reading those, Darian said, pouring coffee. I can't. I need to know what we're dealing with. We're dealing with gossip. It'll fade. Will it? Look at this one. She held up a particularly nasty editorial. While the courts may have cleared Duke Blackthorne, the question remains, what kind of man keeps a woman locked in his house for 2 years and calls it mercy? They're twisting everything. Let them. We know the truth. But truth doesn't matter if no one believes it. Alara set down the paper. We need to do more. More than what? We gave them evidence, testimony, witnesses. What else is there? Alara thought for a moment. We need to show them, not tell them. Show them who we really are. How? I don't know yet, but Catherine walked in, looking more alert than she had in days. I have an idea. They both looked at her. The East Wing, Catherine said. Turn it into something useful. A hospital, maybe. Or a place for women who need help. Women like me who've been hurt and have nowhere to go. Darian set down his coffee cup. You want to open a refuge? Why not? This house is massive. You have resources. And I have experience being the exact kind of person who'd need a place like that. Catherine sat down. Think about it. Instead of the East Wing being a symbol of imprisonment, it becomes a symbol of freedom, of second chances. Alara felt something spark in her chest. That's brilliant. It's expensive, Darian pointed out. You have money. Some. But running a facility like that, staffing it, maintaining it, that's not a one-time cost. So we fundraise, Ilara said. Host events. Reach out to wealthy families. Make it a cause people want to support. And who's going to manage it? Catherine raised her hand. I will, if you'll let me. Darian stared at her. Catherine, you're still recovering, which is exactly why I'm perfect for this. I know what it's like. I know what helps and what doesn't. And I need this, Darian. I need to turn what happened to me into something meaningful. He looked at Ilara. She nodded. All right, he said slowly, but we do this properly. Hire qualified staff, consult with medical professionals. This isn't just about good intentions. Agreed, Catherine said, but we start now, today, before the gossip hardens into permanent judgment. Ilara stood up. I'll write to the families who supported us last night. See who's willing to help. I'll talk to architects, Darian added of hip. Figure out what renovations we need. Catherine smiled. Then let's get to work. The next 6 months were a blur. The East Wing was gutted and rebuilt. The dark, oppressive rooms were transformed into bright, airy spaces designed for healing. Medical equipment was brought in. Staff were hired, doctors, nurses, counselors who specialized in treating women who'd suffered trauma. The Thornfield Women's Refuge opened on a cold morning in November. 20 women came in the first week. Women who'd been beaten by husbands, thrown out by families, or simply lost in a world that had no place for them. Catherine met each one personally, listened to their stories, and helped them find their footing. The gossip didn't stop. Some people called it a publicity stunt. Others said Darian was trying to buy forgiveness. But slowly, as the refuge's reputation grew, as women who'd been helped started speaking out, the narrative shifted. The Blackthorn name stopped being synonymous with fear. It became synonymous with second chances. Ilara threw herself into fundraising. She organized charity balls, dinner parties, auctions. She learned quickly that society women would donate generously if you made them feel important, so she did. Put their names on plaques, thanked them publicly, made sure they knew they were part of something larger than themselves. Within a year, the refuge was self-sustaining. Within 2, they were expanding into a second building. And somewhere in the chaos, Ilara realized she was happy. Not the quiet, careful happiness of someone afraid to jinx it, but real, messy, complicated happiness. The kind that came from hard work and shared purpose and knowing you were building something that mattered. One evening, 3 years after Ashford's death, Ilara found Darian in the library. He was staring at a portrait that had recently been hung, a formal painting of the two of them, commissioned by Catherine as a gift. What do you think? Ilara asked. I think I look terrifying. You look distinguished. Same thing. He turned to look at her. Do you ever regret it? Regret what? Marrying me. Staying, all of this. Ilara walked over, slipped her hand into his. Not once. Not even when people whisper about you in the market. When they call you the Duchess who married a monster. They don't call you that anymore. Some do. Some always will. But most people see you for what you are now, a man who's trying to be better than what came before. Darian looked back at the portrait. I'm not sure I'll ever be good enough. Good enough for what? For you, for this life, for... He stopped, swallowed hard. We've been married 3 years, Ilara, and I still wake up some mornings convinced you'll realize you made a mistake. Then you're an idiot, Ilara said affectionately, because I knew what I was getting into, and I chose it anyway. Why? Because you're worth it. Because underneath all the guilt and self-hatred, you're kind, you're loyal, you care so much it hurts you. She touched his face. And because I love you. It was the first time she'd said it out loud. Darian went very still. You love me? Yes. Even knowing everything I've done, everything I am? Especially knowing that. Ilara stood on her toes, kissed him softly. You're not perfect, Darian. Neither am I. But we work, and that's more than most people get. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. I love you too. I should have said it sooner. You're saying it now. That's enough. They stood there holding each other in a library full of books and ghosts and second chances, and Ilara thought about the girl she'd been 3 years ago. The girl who'd walked into this house terrified and alone. She was gone now, replaced by someone stronger, someone who'd survived and rebuilt and learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. A knock on the door. Catherine poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation." Darian pulled back. "What kind of situation?" "Good kind. A woman just arrived, says she's been traveling for 2 weeks to get here. She heard about the refuge and—" Catherine's voice caught. "She's pregnant, and she has nowhere else to go." Alara and Darian exchanged a look. "Take her to the medical wing," Darian said. "Make sure she's comfortable. We'll be right there." Catherine nodded and disappeared. Alara squeezed Darian's hand. "Ready?" "Are we ever?" "No, but we do it anyway." They walked out together. The years that followed weren't easy. The refuge grew, but so did the challenges. Funding was always tight. Staff turnover was high, and some women who came for help weren't ready to accept it. They left in the middle of the night, went back to the situations that had hurt them, and all Alara and Darian could do was keep the door open in case they came back. But there were victories too. Women who arrived broken and left whole. Women who found jobs, started businesses, built new lives. Women who came back years later with their children to say thank you. Catherine bloomed. She hired more staff, expanded the programs, started advocating for legal reforms that would protect vulnerable women. She never fully recovered from her trauma, still had nightmares, still struggled with crowds, but she channeled that pain into purpose, and she was brilliant at it. Alara's family visited occasionally. Her father never quite forgave himself for selling her into marriage, even though Alara told him repeatedly that everything had worked out. Her mother fussed over the refuge like it was her own project. And Charlotte, now 18 and far too clever for her own good, asked pointed questions about women's rights that made even Catherine pause. "She's going to change the world," Catherine said one day, watching Charlotte argue with a local politician about voting rights. "She learned from the best," Alara replied. Life settled into a rhythm. Not peaceful, never peaceful, but purposeful, meaningful. And then, 4 years after their marriage, Alara discovered she was pregnant. She told Darian on a quiet evening in spring. They were in the gardens, walking through flower beds that had been recently planted. "I'm pregnant," she said simply. Darian stopped walking. "What?" "About 3 months along. The doctor confirmed it yesterday." He stared at her. Then, slowly, his face transformed. Not into pure joy, Darian was too complicated for that, but into something softer, something that looked like hope. "Are you happy?" he asked carefully. "Terrified, but yes, happy. I don't know how to be a father." "Neither did yours, and look how that turned out." Alara paused. "Actually, bad example." Darian laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. "What if I'm like him?" "You won't be." "How do you know?" "Because you're already worried about it. He never was." Alara took his hands. "You're going to make mistakes. We both are. But we'll do it together, and we'll do better than what came before. Promise?" "I can't promise that, but I can promise I'll stop you if you start going down that path." "How?" "I'll hit you with something heavy. That's your solution to everything. It works." He pulled her close, rested his hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby. We're having a baby." "Are you going to cry?" "Possibly." "Good. I've been crying for 2 days. Your turn." They stood in the garden as evening fell, holding each other and thinking about the future. The pregnancy was difficult. Alara was sick for months. The doctor ordered bed rest, which she ignored. Catherine and Darian had to physically restrain her from working at the refuge during her 8th month. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she snapped. "You're both if you don't rest," Catherine shot back. Alara glared but stayed put. The baby came early, a daughter, small and loud and perfect. Darian held her for the first time with hands that shook. "She's so tiny." "She'll get bigger," Alara said from the bed, exhausted but smiling. "What should we name her?" They'd discussed this, gone through dozens of options. But now, looking at her daughter's scrunched-up face, Alara knew exactly what her name should be. Hope. Darian looked up. Hope? Because that's what she is. What all of this is. Hope that we can be better, do better, break the cycle. Hope Blackthorn. Darian tested the name. I like it. Good, because I'm too tired to argue. Catherine appeared in the doorway, beaming. Can I see her? Come meet your niece. Catherine sat beside the bed, and Darian carefully transferred the baby into her arms. Catherine looked down at Hope with an expression of pure wonder. Hello, little one, she whispered. Welcome to the family. It's a mess, but we're working on it. Hope yawned. She's perfect, Catherine said. She's ours, Darian replied. And for the first time in 5 generations, a Blackthorn child was born into a house filled with love instead of fear. The years that followed were chaotic in the best way. Hope grew into a whirlwind of a child, curious, stubborn, completely fearless. She toddled through the refuge, charming the residents and staff alike. By the time she was 3, she'd decided Catherine was her favorite person and followed her everywhere. You've created a monster, Darian told Catherine one afternoon, watching Hope help organize medical supplies. She's brilliant, Catherine said proudly. She dumped an entire bottle of laudanum on the floor yesterday. She was investigating. She was making a mess. Same thing. Alara appeared in the doorway. Hope, darling, we don't investigate by dumping. Hope looked up, completely unrepentant. Why not? Because then there's nothing left to investigate. Hope considered this. Oh, that makes sense. Thank you for understanding. Can I investigate the attic instead? Absolutely not. Hope sighed dramatically and went back to her supplies. Darian shook his head. She's going to run this place someday. I know, Alara said. Terrifying, isn't it? Honestly, I can't wait. When Hope was 5, they held a celebration for the refuge's 10th anniversary. Hundreds of people came, former residents, donors, supporters. The gardens were filled with music and laughter. Speeches were made, stories were told, and Catherine stood at the podium looking happier than Alara had ever seen her. 10 years ago, I was locked in a room in the East Wing, convinced I was going to die there, Catherine said. Today, that same wing is home to 40 women who are rebuilding their lives. That's not a miracle. That's what happens when people refuse to give up. On themselves, on each other, on the idea that we can be better than our worst moments. She looked at Darian and Alara. The Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn took a legacy of fear and transformed it into something beautiful. Not because they were perfect, but because they were willing to try. And that's all any of us can do. Try, fail, try again. The crowd applauded. Hope, sitting on Darian's shoulders, clapped so hard she nearly fell off. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Hope was asleep, Alara and Darian stood on the same balcony where Catherine had almost jumped. Do you remember standing here 3 years ago? Alara asked. I remember thinking I was going to watch her die. But you didn't. No, we saved her. We saved each other. Alara leaned against the railing. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't married you? All the time. And I think I'd be dead or in prison, or so buried in guilt and isolation that I might as well be. Darian turned to look at her. You didn't just save my life, Alara. You gave me a reason to live it. You did the same for me. I was going to be a pawn, a bargaining chip, something to be traded and forgotten. She smiled. Instead, I became this, a duchess who runs a refuge and raises a daughter who's going to change the world. No pressure on Hope. She can handle it. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. I love you, Darian said quietly. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. Every day. Even when you're driving me crazy. Especially when I'm driving you crazy, Alara corrected. Especially then. She kissed him, soft and slow and full of promise. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For being brave enough to change, for letting me in, for building this with me. I should be thanking you. Then we're even. They went inside together. 15 years after their marriage, Catherine died. Not violently, not dramatically, just quietly, in her sleep, from a heart that had finally given out after too many years of stress and trauma. The funeral was enormous. Women came from across the country. Women Catherine had helped, women she'd saved, women who owed their lives to her tireless work. They filled the chapel to capacity and spilled out into the gardens. Alara spoke at the service, her voice steady despite the tears running down her face. Catherine Hartwell was my friend, my partner in building something that mattered, and the bravest person I've ever known. She looked out at the sea of faces. She survived things that would have destroyed most people. And instead of letting that pain consume her, she turned it into purpose. She saved hundreds of lives, maybe thousands. And the legacy she's left behind will continue saving lives long after all of us are gone. Hope, now 15 and heartbreakingly beautiful, stood up. Can I say something? Alara nodded. Hope walked to the podium. Aunt Catherine taught me that strength isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. She was terrified every single day, but she never let that stop her. Hope's voice cracked. She told me once that the world would try to make me small, try to convince me that my pain, my story, my existence didn't matter, and her advice was simple: prove them wrong. She looked at her parents. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run the refuge, continue her work, make sure her legacy doesn't end here. The crowd erupted in applause. Darian and Alara exchanged a look, pride and terror in equal measure. She's too young, Darian whispered. So were we, Alara whispered back. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be. Hope took over the refuge at 16. She was brilliant at it, expanded the programs, modernized the facilities, started lobbying Parliament for legal changes. By the time she was 20, she'd become a public figure, the face of women's advocacy, speaking at universities and writing articles and generally terrifying anyone who underestimated her. She was also stubborn, hot-headed, and prone to making decisions without consulting anyone. She's exactly like you, Darian told Alara one evening after Hope had announced yet another expansion without running it past them first. She's exactly like you, Alara countered, convinced she has to do everything alone. Fair point. We need to let her make mistakes, even when those mistakes could bankrupt us. Especially then, how else will she learn? Darian sighed. I hate when you're right. Get used to it. 20 years after their marriage, Alara and Darian sat in their bedroom, older and grayer but still together. Do you remember the first night you stayed here? Darian asked. I remember thinking I'd made a terrible mistake. And now? Now I know I made the best decision of my life. Darian pulled her close. Even though I was a complete disaster, especially because of that, you were real, broken and honest and trying so hard to be better. Alara rested her head on his shoulder. Most people spend their whole lives pretending. You never did. And that's why I fell in love with you. I fell in love with you because you refused to be afraid of me. I was terrified of you. But you didn't let it stop you. Neither did you. They fell asleep like that. Tangled together, the house quiet around them. Darian died when Hope was 25. A heart attack, sudden and massive. He was in the gardens inspecting the new rose bushes, and he simply collapsed. By the time Alara reached him, he was already gone. The grief was overwhelming. Alara spent weeks in a fog, moving through the house like a ghost. Hope ran everything: the estate, the refuge, the funeral arrangements. She was efficient, capable, and completely falling apart behind closed doors. I don't know how to do this without him, Alara told her one night. Neither do I, Hope admitted. But we have to try. It's what he would have wanted. He would have wanted to stay alive. He would have wanted us to keep going, to not let this break us. Alara looked at her daughter, this fierce, brilliant young woman who'd inherited the best parts of both her parents, and felt something shift. You're right. I know I am. Don't get cocky. Too late. They held each other and cried. The refuge was renamed in Darian's honor. The Blackthorn Hartwell Refuge for Women, a name that honored both the man who'd funded it and the woman who'd built it. Hope continued Catherine's work. Alara advised when asked, but mostly stayed out of the way, letting her daughter forge her own path. And slowly, painfully, life moved forward. Alara lived another 15 years, long enough to see Hope marry a quiet scholar who adored her. Long enough to meet her grandchildren, 3 of them, all loud and stubborn and perfect. Long enough to see the refuge expand into 5 cities, helping thousands of women every year. On her last day, surrounded by family, Alara looked at the portrait of her and Darian that still hung in the library. "Did we do it?" she asked Hope. "Did we break the cycle?" Hope squeezed her hand. "Yes, Mother, you did." "Then I can rest." "Not yet. You still need to meet your great-grandchild. She's due next month." Alara smiled. "Another girl?" "Another girl." "What are you naming her?" "Alara Catherine Blackthorn." Alara's eyes filled with tears. "That's perfect." "I thought you'd approve." They sat together as the sun set. 4 generations of Blackthorn women connected by love and resilience and the refusal to be defined by the past. Alara died peacefully that night, and when they buried her beside Darian in the family cemetery, Hope stood at the gravestone and made a promise. "I'll keep going. I'll make sure everything you built continues. And I'll teach my daughters what you taught me, that we're not bound by the sins of those who came before us, that we can choose to be better, that love and courage can transform even the darkest legacy into something beautiful." She placed a rose on each grave. "Thank you for everything." And she walked away, ready to write the next chapter of a story that had started with fear and ended with hope. The Blackthorn name lived on, not as a curse, not as a warning, but as a promise that even the most broken things can be rebuilt, that redemption is possible for anyone willing to fight for it, and that sometimes the best legacies are the ones we create ourselves, not inherited, but earned through love, sacrifice, and the simple courage to keep trying, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard.